Hello and welcome to Word for Word New Zealand. I'm your host, David Hogan, with a short study today, wherever you are in the world. And this study is somewhat to do with true Sabbath keeping and also with clouds and with rainbows. I'm going to read from Exodus chapter 31, verses 13 to 17. Truly my Sabbath you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord your God, which sanctifies you. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel. For how long? Forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. I have here for you a one-sentence statement from Ellen White from manuscript 167, 1897, and it reads like this. All who bring to the observance of the Sabbath a heart consecrated to God will find that the day God has sanctified is more to them than they had any idea of. End of quote. Do you like that statement? The Sabbath is for our sanctification. We've just read it in the Bible. I am the Lord that sanctifies you. Verse 13 of Exodus 31. I am the Lord that sanctifies you. And the Lord is talking there to Moses about it in relation to the Sabbath. And the statement I read from the Spirit of Prophecy said that we can have more for us from the Lord on the Sabbath day than we've got any idea of. I like that statement. And so what I've got for you is 3 references to the Spirit of Prophecy. Now, you may not be a Seventh-day Adventist and watching us. That's fine. You may be a Seventh-day Adventist and have kept the Sabbath most of your life. That's fine. But what concerns me a lot these days is the fact, yes, we can tell the difference between numbers 1 and 7, but the Sabbath has way more to it than just knowing which day to go to church on, sing a few songs, listen to a sermon, do a Sabbath school lesson, whatever it is. There is more to it than that. And I am a little bit annoyed with myself that I didn't find this out earlier. So therefore, over the next 7 or 8 weeks, while I'm not doing the longer sermons, I'll be doing some shorter preparations like this. And you'll find just written below you these references that I'm giving now verbally to you. You'll find written below this in the description. I have 3 references. The first is Testimonies, Volume 2, page 582. The testimony is called, How Shall We Keep the Sabbath? The second reference is Testimonies, Volume 6, page 349, The Observance of the Sabbath. Now, those 2 testimonies, one's a bit longer than the other, but I would suggest that every one of us, when reading that, will find at least 2 or 3 things we didn't know or weren't doing properly on the Sabbath. And the third reference is a testimony called The Seal of God, which is the 7th-day Sabbath, And that is found in Testimonies Volume 5, starting at page 207. Now, these three references I've just given you all tie in with the whole of Isaiah chapter 58. Write it down. And if you forget, it's in the description below this. Isaiah chapter 58. I'm now going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, and I'm going to read verses 29 to 31. When the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them, and you dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Getting nosy, you see. Maybe I could do likewise. I will do likewise. Verse 31, you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they have done to their gods, for they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. End of quote. Now, everything that's written in the Old Testament is for us today. Even the last sentence, and they burn their sons and daughters to the fire of their gods. Brothers and sisters, there are billions of parents today whose sons and daughters will eventually burn in fire at the end of the 7th millennium. Some will be extinguished immediately. Others may take longer, depending on God's decision and how, shall we say, disobedient they've been. So it's all very well to look back at the Israelites and say, oh, yes, even Moloch, Moloch was burning their children in front of Moloch into this big hot furnace and getting a thrill out of it and a blessing out of it from Moloch. Well, today through sport, concerts, hobbies, fashion, phone games, gambling, etc., 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 people are burning their children today. It's just a bigger gap in between, brothers and sisters. So is it any wonder why the clergy, who are supposed to be the guardians of religious purity, think so liberally today, that the laity acts in the way it does and shrugs off paganism, claiming that it was harmless? Was it? Is it? Does it make any difference really whether we even just take a small sneak at things of the world, the excitement and enjoyment and the sports and whatever it is? Does it matter if we have a sneak at paganism? Yes, it certainly matters to God. Because why God's a lawgiver? It was because of these heathen practices that God drove out the inhabitants of the land. They're already naughty people. They weren't just going around doing their business. They were practicing an abomination things before Israel got there. And people say, oh, how cruel of God to give Israel the power to go and destroy these nations. Well, they were doing abominable things, cruelty to children and many other things before Israel ever got there. But God does not want his people to go in the process of this judgment and punishment that will eventually come from God. We must not be ensnared, it said in Deuteronomy 12:29. Take heed that we are not ensnared. In the Bible, a snare is a figurative expression of destruction through deception. The snare itself does not destroy, but it leads to destruction. The Israelites heard these words in the last months, notice, before these words in Deuteronomy 12, the last months before they were going into the promised land. we're in the last months before the redeemed of this world will go to heaven and then to eventually the promised land when the earth's made new. They had a long journey through the wilderness. The redeemed have a long journey too once they're redeemed. But we're standing on the borders of the river, just like they were. Their towns, their fortifications, houses, farms, businesses, everything that Israel took from them, they were to use for their own godly purposes. Everything God gives us from this world is to be used for a godly purpose. Yes, we are in the last months, just like they were when Moses wrote that. Now, there are many who haven't been brought up Christians, who were born into a ready-made society. The world was already here and we came into it. And because we had no alternative, we just accepted it. I did. I knew nothing of these things. Child, teenager, young man, married, with children. That was it. This was the way of the world. You got a job, you worked, you had your Christmas holidays, whatever it was. You did it. You grew, born into this world. And some of you out there will know exactly what I'm talking about. You thought that was normal. However, we have a calling to God. And that sometimes will mean we'll have to unlearn some things our parents taught us. We'll just have to unlearn them. We must reject any false practices that we've inherited from the land that we were born into. And those things that are a snare, which we talked about, are doubling and tripling now. And so I'm going to Genesis chapter 9 and verses 12 to 17. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations." Now this is God talking to Noah. "I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and," what is the next words? "The earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud." Verse 15, "And I'll remember my covenant which was between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy the earth." Now, when God said that he'll remember, he's making us understand that we're to remember also. "The rainbow," verse 16, "shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." Verse 17, "And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I've established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." Wonderful, isn't it? We know the story of the flood. The whole world was swamped. 8 people were saved. Now, Revelation chapter 10 and verse 1, please. "And I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire." Here we have in one sentence a cloud and a rainbow described, and this mighty angel coming down. The first time the Bible uses the word or a concept, frequently it sets out the stage for how writers are going to use it throughout the rest of the Bible. And clouds are no exception. We find clouds first described immediately after the flood. There hadn't been rain before. Immediately after the flood, the world started to have clouds. And they are linked to the sign of the rainbow and God's everlasting promise that he will never again flood the earth. Point number one. If you haven't seen a rainbow today, I'm sure in this part of the world you've seen a cloud. Well, associate that cloud. There's a few things to associate clouds with. I'm just starting to find more and more. Associate that cloud with a rainbow and associate that with God's promise, all his promises to us. Today we are far removed from the events from the flood. So it may be difficult to grasp what it was like straight after when Noah came out onto the earth. It would have been an amazing sight just for Noah and his family and the animals led out of the ark. Now, from the genealogies, we know that humanity has been on the earth about 1.5 millennia before the flood. People lived much longer lives and produced numerous children. Only God and perhaps the angelic host knows how many millions of billions of people that were destroyed in the flood on those 40 days and 40 nights. Only God knows. Maybe the angels know, I don't know. But you work out the generations and the time and how long they lived and how many children they had, brothers and sisters. It's a lot of people that have perished. So God forcibly and deliberately ended that age. Yet, at least we think that all is hopeless. And another worldwide catastrophe like that could happen and wipe everything off the planet. God gives us a promise. And he repeats it several times through the Bible. He will not destroy all flesh at once like that again. Of course, we know from many verses that at the destruction at the end of the age, there will be a destruction. But that doesn't nullify God's promise. The point remains that God will not destroy all flesh at once at any time by a flood or a fire. Genesis 9:12-17 indicates that the rainbow is a sign of that promise, but also shows that the setting and context of that promise is in the clouds. In this promise, we see elements of this word here, faithfulness. When you see a cloud, great is thy faithfulness. You know the hymn. When you see a cloud, great is thy faithfulness. When you see a rainbow, even greater is your faithfulness. How wonderful is that? That his mercy is here for us. Psalm 51 verse 1, Paul starts off with the multitude of your tender mercies towards us. An interesting parallel to this appears in the book of Revelation. Now, Genesis and Revelation mirror each other in many ways, these two books. Frequently, when a matter is introduced in Genesis, it is resolved and concluded in the book of Revelation. Genesis is quite an open book, posing questions. The book of Revelation closes up those questions with closing answers. They are the bookends of the Bible, and they claim a lot of the same themes. Notice what John describes in Revelation 10:1 again. I saw an angel, mighty angel, coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, a rainbow was on his head, and his face like the sun, and his feet like a pillars of fire. Studying into this chapter makes it plain that this being is no mere angel, but is in fact Jesus Christ. In the sequence of events, this chapter might be called the beginning of the end. That's right, Revelation 10:1, the beginning of the end, because it shows the mystery of God is finished. At the point at which there will be no more delay in everything reaching its conclusion, and we can see it now in the world every day, every minute. It's not hard to find out. Here at the end, John's vision pictures Jesus with a rainbow, showing that he has not forgotten his promise to mankind. This will be important in the time of trouble, understanding this as you've got your book of Revelation, seeing that rainbow around God. He's reminding you of the promise, even though you're going through a time of trouble. Even as he's about to unleash tremendous destruction through plagues and things on humanity, the sign of his promise is still there, and not the whole world is going to be destroyed. Now notice he's clothed with a cloud. It is his covering, and this showing his great love, because it allows only the brightness of his face and his feet to show. To understand the significance of this, consider what a cloud is and does. By way of definition, it is a visible mass of droplets of water or frozen crystals suspended in the atmosphere. Sometimes clouds bring rain, which can be either a blessing or a curse, depending on the circumstances, of course, but other times they can pass by without shearing a drop. Nevertheless, there is one thing a cloud will always do. If it has any size at all, it will impede light, the light of the sun, as it crosses through it. Listen. Now, there's a wonderful object lesson. Since it is clothing Jesus Christ in Revelation with a cloud, this cloud filters out some of his breathtaking, glorious radiance, which we cannot as human beings look at and live. It will be lethal to mankind if we saw the brightness of his glory, but he is going to be returning in glory. And that awesome glory has a terrible and lethal effect on sinful flesh. Behold, he comes with clouds, and every eye shall see him. Now write it down, Revelation 1:7. There it is, something we're starting to sum up here. Behold, he comes with what? Clouds. One moment, hang on, I thought he's going to be revealed this time. I thought he's going to be revealed. He couldn't be revealed to John in Revelation. It would have destroyed John. But when he comes, he's going to be fully revealed. Oh, dear. Hide us from the face of him. You know the scene. What are these clouds that are around him then? They are Jesus' angels. That's what they are. So here's a second thing when we're seeing a cloudy day. We can see. First of all, a cloud's blocking out the brilliant light of God's brilliance, Jesus' brilliance, to save us. Second, clouds are showing what? That you've got a guardian angel right beside you now and always have had. You've got angels around you. They're serving God 10,000 times 10,000s and thousands of thousands, waiting to do God's will. Every time you look at those clouds, all through the Sabbath day, look up and think, wow, angels, wow, God's protecting us. We've got all these cloud of witnesses, said Paul, cloud of witnesses that are there to help us. These are the things that the Sabbath day is to do for us. It's not to weaken our faith. It's to strengthen our faith. We must be reminded of these things, that it is a rainbow of promise. The clouds protect us from the rays of the sun. God's angels will protect us from the venomous rays of Satan. Now, as we come to our last 5 minutes in this short presentation, daily, Christian antagonism against the law of God is increasing. I don't know why these people who once thought, yes, when it says, here are they that keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus, that it means here are they that keep the commandments, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Why is it that So many are turning away and then writing and saying to others and putting things on the internet and saying, I've found freedom in Christ. I don't have to keep the law. I've been taught by my church for years I have to keep the law. I've struggled to keep it, and that's their problem. They've struggled to keep it instead of asking Christ to keep it in them. That's the big, little, big, little, big, little, big mistake. Never forget what the children of Israel said at the foot of Mount Sinai. Yes, we'll keep the law. And they went off and broke it and had a big party around the calf. They were confident. Yeah, we'll keep the law. You've got to say to God, I can't. But don't walk away from it. Say, God, live your life for me. That's what it's all about. Now, I've got 2 texts for you here to finish off because, unfortunately, the apostatizers away from keeping God's law are getting very smart and cunning and misapplying scriptures that we've been using to emphasize the loveliness of God's law and the beauty of keeping the law. Now, the first is a description of sin. Whosoever committeth sin transgresses also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. 1 John 3:4, write it down. And I'm going to be giving over the next few weeks texts like this which cannot be argued against. You cannot argue against that. It's just saying that it's saying clearly and plainly, sin is transgression of the law. Now, there was a woman about to be stoned. What did Jesus say to her at the end of this big incident? Neither do I condemn thee. Go and what no more? Go and sin no more. Write it down. John 8:11 comparing with 1 John 3:4. John 8:11, go and sin no more. 1 John 3, sin is transgressing of the law. Therefore, Jesus is saying to her, you go and keep the law. It's not hard to work out. Now, I would suggest for homework or something to do on Sabbath or Sunday that just look up 1 John 3:4 and John 8:11, read them clearly and slowly and write them out by hand. Because, brothers and sisters, if you're going to stand for God's truth in the coming trouble, there are 2 texts that you're going to need in your artillery for the Lord. And so we've come to the end of this little study. There will be more on this at 7 o'clock each Friday, and it'll be up as I'm recording this. It's up on the internet. So I'd like to say thank you for joining me, Word for Word New Zealand. Thank you for joining me live. I'll say a little closing prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for the gift of Jesus, the freedom of keeping the law, the freedom of Christianity, the blessings you've shown us and the clouds and the rainbow. How wonderful, Lord. And that we're not to take snapshot glances of the world every now and then and indulge in some things, just step away from Jesus for 10 minutes, half an hour, and have a little play with the world. Oh, Lord, keep us, please, from having snapshots with the world, that we stay on the straight and narrow always, from when we get up to when we sleep at night. This is our prayer with thanks. In the blessed and holy name of Jesus. Amen.